All right, in this video, I want to break down, walk you through this stylized fire. It's a mini tutorial. I try to go quickly over everything, and this is basically how it looks like. It's a billboard, and yeah. So if we isolate just the fire for now and go emitter by emitter, I'm going to break down all the settings and the materials. And if you don't want to make your own, it's also on Fab. So if you want to support the channel, it would be much appreciated. Yeah, note that it is only 5.7, which does not mean that you cannot use it in any other version, but you would have to have 5.7 installed and a project created with 5.7. From that 5.7 project, you can migrate it to your actual project. So you cannot directly import it, but you can migrate it from a 5.7 project into one of your projects. So let's start with, with the fire itself. So it's a simple sprite renderer. I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to try to show when I open something, because sometimes in tutorials they just cut into some window zoomed in and you don't know what where exactly that came from. So in this case, as you can see, it's a GPU simulation with the fixed boundaries, just a default. And if you look at the emitter state, it's system. I think all of them are system. Okay, not all of them, but well, we'll go through them anyway. So we spawn instantaneous one emitter. Then the initialized particle is set to the current loop duration, which is the system here, which is 5 seconds in my case. I also bumped the Z position a bit up so it better aligns with the other emitters, and the sprite size is 100. Then the particle state is just the default and sprite facing the camera. And here we have our first material, but before we click on that, I changed the sub UV blending enabled to not be enabled, so to false. Set to face camera and unaligned. And let's go into the first material. So this is how the material instance looks like. If you go here and then showcase, you will see what you can do with it. You can do all sorts of things besides changing the color. And you can see how they react, how the shader reacts to the different parameters. And if we go into the actual shader, the master shader, it's a bit big, so I'm not gonna go into all of this, but as you can see, we have the scaling and the UV speed, the pattering speed for the distortion, and for the fire, which is the flame texture. There's also a couple other flame textures in this fab project, which is called color noise. So you can also pick the other color noise. But again, you can just look at the showcase that is linked in fab. Yeah, but it is important that this texture is actually packed. As you can see, it actually has different kinds of noise textures in each color channel. So that's how we actually get can use these. And here we define the shape. So if we are taking a look at that, it is basically just the rough shape of the flame, which can also be adjusted in the material instance. So with this remapped value, we get the base shape, which is already basically what we want. The rest here is actually just adjusting how intense the fire is at some places. For example, here you can see that we mask out the intensity. So the top is much brighter than the bottom, like the highlights. And above here, we do the colors. So the default colors can be anything really. You can adjust them in the material instance. And yeah, so the finished result on the top here, when you apply the colors, will look a bit odd because it's not masked, but then we do add the mask, etc., and it looks very interesting. Then we have this intensity that controls the overall intensity, and yeah, then we pipe that in to the eye adaptation inverse node, so it looks good in any kind of exposure. Plug that into emission, and that would be this material. I will slowly go over every node here in case you caught everything. Again, I don't want to go through every node, otherwise it will be way too long. And yeah, not every scalar needs to be explained. You can just play around with it. Yeah, find out for yourself. And yeah, that's basically it. This is everything. All right, so this is the fire emitter. So if we go next to the, it looks a bit odd because of the collision. But it's really hard to see without it. So this is the amber emitter, which also is the life cycle set to system. Spawn rate is set to 32. You can really set it to anything. If you want more amber, you can increase it. If you want less, do that. The lifetime here is set to 1 to 1.5. So we have a little bit of variation when they disappear. And I set the color to the following values if you want to copy it exactly, and a value of 10. So we have the nice glow. And then we have the sprite size here is set to random non-uniform. And we have min and max set to the following. So we have a nice variation. You can set it to be smaller, so it actually from close up looks more like embers, or do other things, like have a different kind of material. I just used a really simple material here. It's called M symbol. Then the shape location is a sphere with a radius of 32. The velocity, you can just copy all the values here. Then the particle state, again, a default thing. I have a wind force here where you could expose it to the user or adjust it on runtime. If you have like some wind system, in this case, I just made it blow in the x-axis, and that's basically it. Some drag, so they get slower over time. Then I'm scaling the color, specifically the alpha, so they fade out. And then we have a vertex force. That's the that's why they go into like this slight circle. Also have this curl noise force, which does a bit of randomization. So it's not, if we just have the vortex, it looks a bit unnatural. But if we enable that, it adds some randomness to it. And then the mandatory solve forces and velocity, because we are doing some stuff with that here. And the sprite renderer. Again, I disabled the sub UV blending enabled, and I changed, you can keep the standard sprite material. I did change it and made my own one because I wanted to have the eye adoption inverse node, but everything else is the same. Yeah, and that's the amber. So if we go to the smoke, I want it to be quite stylized. I'm still working on it, so we'll see if I come up with a better one. But again, here we have, or not again, for the first time here, we have a system that is on the mode lifecycle mode self for 2 seconds. We have a spawn rate of 8. We have the initialized particles to be at 1.25 to 1.75. The mass is random, 0.75 to 1.25, as well as the sprite size is random. And these are the values. Shape location is a sphere at the radius of 0, so it's basically all coming from one point. Then we have here the velocity settings. There you can copy a slight camera offset, so it's slightly behind the fire. Let me disable that. You see the fire is actually in the front. Otherwise, they would overlap and the smoke could be in front. So this makes sure that the smoke's actually behind it. And you can do similar stuff with the ember or whatever. Then we have, well, again, the particle state. Then we scale the sprite size by this curve. It goes from 0 at 0.5 to the 1 second. It's 1.25 the value. We also have a drag here, very little, but it is there. Then we do the mandatory solver here for forces and velocity, and have this color curve or gradient, and the dynamic material parameters, which we will explain in a second. I only have the first one here, which is probably the dissolve, and it goes from 0.5 and being 0 to 0.7 something being 0.2 something to 1. And that takes us to the actual smoke dissolve, which is here also set to face camera, and it's a material instance. There's not really much here, so it's a really simple dissolve material. We just take the particle color, plug that right in with the texture, and here we use this texture for dissolve and have dynamic parameters that I just showed in the Niagara system, and we control the actual dissolve here with it. Lastly, we have distortion. This is visible here. It's like the normal, the panning normal map here. And the distortion is also set to lifecycle mode self with a loop duration of 1. The spawn rate is set to 8. You can just play around with that. Initialized particle, also a randomized lifetime, 0.5 to 1. And a slight position offset, so it actually starts a bit lower. So if I enable everything again and press play, you can see it actually starts already like in the fire. And if you don't do that, it starts kind of where the smoke is, which is kind of fine, but I like the distortion to be visible in the fire as well, which makes it look really nice. And also the sprite size here is changed to 10. Then we have here the at velocity, which pushes it upwards, and the shape location here is a cylinder with the following parameters here and here. Then the particle state and scale sprite size also scales from at 0 from 6 to 12 at 1, which when we enable the wireframe, you can see here the bigger ones at the bottom. Here's the distortion. It is perfectly surrounding the fire. You can also just change the sprite size here to be 60, and then you just scale it times 2 or whatever. But yeah, again, we need the solver here, and then we also have here dynamic parameters, and we have 3 here, but the actual one that I change with the curve is the flatness, which is the normal flatness. You can like flatten the normal so it's not so intense, or the intensity of the normal. Finally, we get to the sprite renderer, and let me disable this. It's a bit annoying. Again, we face the camera plane, and we have another material here. It's the material instance distortion. You can see there's something happening here. It is a bit hard to see. Things are happening here. This is good, a good demo. And yeah, so if you go into the master material here, it is a bit longer, but it's not too long. So we have the normal here and the dynamic parameters here that I just showed with these 3 parameters, but currently the R channel and the blue channel I'm not actually dynamically changing, but you can play around with how strong the distortion is or the scale in your system, Niagara system. And here we just do again like simple panning for the normal map here. Then we flatten the normal with this attribute and lerp it with the texture that we use to distort. And again, some panning here into the distortion texture. And if we click on the distortion texture here and open it, it's just a simple directional noise. And yeah, so if we go back here, we have like also an intensity attribute here parameter, and then we pan this distortion through this texture and plug it into the refraction. And for this, we set it to translucency, gray transmittance, which is, I think, a new one in 5.7, or it got renamed, and unlit. And down here, we set it to index of refraction under refraction method. And let me just see if I forgot anything. Niagara sprites, particle. I did forget to show this stuff here. So it's also here unlit in translucent gray transmittance. And let me see if I forgot something. You can just copy these ones as well. Let me see for the fire. Again, translucency gray, transmittance, unlit. And let me see if we have something changed. Here, used with Niagara sprites. That's basically it. And yeah, that's the whole Stylized fire that I made. And yeah, thanks for watching.